In a world split between the Jurchens and the Joseon, simmering resentment over an unjust system breeds hatred, birthing a horde of merciless barbarians. As the barbarians set a village ablaze, a kid manages to escape. He turns out to be the sole survivor of the incident. Being just a child, he learns how to kill the barbarians by gaining an understanding of their weaknesses. Soon, he becomes recognized by the world as the Grim Reaper. As tales of him spread faster than rumors, the king of Joseon catches wind of it. He invites him to join a mighty force, known as the Informers, which aims at dispatching the cruel barbarians. He decides to join for the sake of vengeance for his family. The village is set ablaze, and barbarians emerge seemingly out of nowhere, wreaking havoc. They slaughter villagers without mercy, pillaging everything in sight. A woman, cornered by a barbarian, begs for the life of her little baby. Though ready to depart, the barbarian accuses her of being too loud and draws his sword to kill her. Just as he swings, his arm is severed and blood gushes out from the wound. The barbarian is gripped by terror as he realizes that his attacker is none other than Gwiyoung. Known as the Grim Reaper among the barbarians, Gwiyoung's presence spells certain doom. His name, derived from Gwi meaning ghost and Young meaning shadow, is a moniker that strikes fear into their hearts. As the barbarians retreat, attention shifts to a group of elders, traversing the ravaged village, lamenting their vulnerability in the face of barbarian onslaughts. They exchange words about Gwiyoung, marveling at his formidable prowess, which even strikes fear into the hearts of the otherwise relentless barbarians. One elder muses on the plight of their northern region. Each winter brings a grim choice: to succumb to the icy grip of frost or fall prey to the merciless raids of the barbarian hordes. They ponder whether the king remains oblivious to their dire circumstances or merely chooses to feign ignorance, dubbing their homeland a forsaken, cursed domain. Suddenly, a boy dashes in, attempting to punch one of the elders in the face. One of them swiftly intercepts his attack, causing him to wince in pain. It's clear he's upset that they've arrived after the chaos has already unfolded. Suggesting to cut the boy's tongue for his misbehavior, one elder is halted by the one who was attacked, drawing his sword instead. As the boy tries to attack again in his arrogance, he's halted by his little sister, who apologizes to the elder on behalf of her brother. An elder dressed in grayish attire argues that these children are still grappling with the trauma of losing their families to barbarians 7 years ago. These children are not the only ones who have suffered such losses. A young woman lost her husband last year and became a widow, and today she lost her only son. Many others have faced similar tragedies, struggling to cope as women become widows, children become orphans, and entire families are destroyed. The elders discuss the urgent need to speed up the preparations for forming the Informer, a group that could help their situation. The highest-ranking elder commands the others to find Gwiyoung as soon as possible. The scene shifts to some villagers gathered around a new notice, trying to figure out what it says about some changes. Being illiterate, they look for someone who can read it for them. One villager steps forward and informs them that the notice states the king is searching for Gwiyoung and has decided to bestow a Jade Plaque upon him. It seems the royal bodyguards are being recruited, and they want Gwiyoung to join. The villagers, upon learning this, discuss the significance of the Jade Plaque. From what they know, it allows a person to receive something extremely valuable without having to pass any tests. It seems Gwiyoung has been given the offer of a lifetime. The person who read the notice asks the villagers if they know anything substantial about Gwiyoung. The villagers reply, admitting they only heard rumors. One villager mentions an old woman named Zhang from the Undertown who claims to have seen Gwiyoung. They explain that, to their knowledge, Gwiyoung is a recluse who avoids others, with rumors suggesting he's driven to madness and kills indiscriminately. However, they're uncertain whether he targets only barbarians, as only a few have encountered him. As they contemplate the missed opportunity, Gwiyoung seems to be passing up. Gwiyoung himself observes them from a distance, already aware of the king's proposal for him. After watching them for a while, he heads to a nearby food place. The waitress, taken aback by his imposing presence, nervously asks for his order. Gwiyoung calmly requests a bowl of unrefined rice wine. A person with a distinctive hat asks the waitress to bring 2 bowls instead of 1 and turns to Gwiyoung, politely inquiring if he can share the table. Gwiyoung responds coolly, pointing out that there are plenty of other tables available. Undeterred, the person insists on sitting there. Gwiyoung, somewhat intrigued, asks the person if he has any business with him. The person gets straight to the point, revealing that he recognizes Gwiyoung as the formidable figure himself. The waitress is astonished, while Gwiyoung questions how the person is so certain. The person explains that he vaguely remembers Gwiyoung saving his life from barbarians a few years ago, and ever since then, he's been searching for him. Gwiyoung denies the claim of saving the person and asserts that he must have mistaken him for someone else. The person acknowledges the possibility of confusion and suggests that the vengeful spirits of those killed by someone accompany them wherever they go. He then reveals that his father informed him about the formation of the royal bodyguards, aimed at subduing the barbarians in the northern region. This revelation unsettles Gwiyoung, prompting him to question the certainty of the information. The person insists it's a fact and shares that he and his father have been hunting those barbarians ever since his mother was killed. Assuming Gwiyoung shares similar motives, the person invites him to join in their quest to eliminate every barbarian. He encourages Gwiyoung to keep doing what he does best and assures him of both material assistance and emotional backing. Curious, Gwiyoung asks for the person's name. Apologizing for his excitement, the person introduces himself as Tae-il, a member of the Tae family. Gwiyoung, intrigued, warns Tae-il that associating with him might lead to his demise. However, he suggests that if Tae-il isn't afraid of that prospect, he's willing to follow along. Tae expresses confidence, assuring Gwiyoung that he's considered the possibility of his own demise before seeking him out. The scene shifts to the boy who attempted to attack the elders earlier. Upon hearing about the notice, he accompanies his sister, presenting himself as Gwiyoung. Despite his sister's efforts to dissuade him, he remains determined. As it turns out, the boy is not alone in his deception. Many other men have also arrived, pretending to be Gwiyoung. With Gwiyoung's true identity and whereabouts unknown, these opportunists have gathered in hopes of seizing the Jade Plaque and altering their destinies. The elder scrutinizes the crowd, doubting the authenticity of each pretender and questioning whether the real Gwiyoung is among them. Amidst the escalating commotion, Tae emerges, dispersing the crowd to make way for Gwiyoung. He announces his arrival, stating that upon hearing the king's proposal, he has come alongside Gwiyoung. The gathered people become agitated, demanding proof. One among them claims to be the genuine Gwiyoung, not the one brought by Tae. Tae ridicules the impostor for his pretense, asserting that he sees no resemblance to Gwiyoung in him. As they stride toward the elder, Tae assures him of his personal witness to Gwiyoung's identity, his certainty unwavering. Cutting straight to the chase, Gwiyoung questions the elder about the true purpose behind forming the king's bodyguards. Is it indeed to subdue the barbarians in the northern region? The elder responds, expressing his belief that the responsibility for ending the conflict between Joseon and Jurchens rests with the people of their nation. Gwiyoung places blame on the previous king, accusing him of instigating enmity towards the Jurchens and initiating the vicious cycle of warfare. He contends that despite Jurchens' efforts to maintain good relations with Joseon, the king did nothing to reciprocate. Gwiyoung argues that the root of the problem lies not with the people, but with the neglectful actions of the king. Despite Tae's attempts to intervene and prevent Gwiyoung from speaking out against the king, Gwiyoung remains resolute, determined to make his point heard. The elder acknowledges Gwiyoung's philosophical insight, admitting that he's not entirely mistaken. He questions whether Gwiyoung intends to shirk the responsibility of rectifying past wrongs by reconciling the enmity between the two nations. Despite the prevailing perception, the elder asserts that Joseon has never truly abandoned the northern region, despite it being labeled as the cursed land. Gwiyoung's passionate defense of Joseon sparks anger within him, prompting him to demand that the elder relay his challenge to the king to come and affirm this stance in person. With politeness, the elder reveals himself as the king, stating that his words are indeed the truth. This revelation leaves the assembled people bewildered as they bow down upon realizing that he is Sejong Yidu, the fourth king of Joseon. Tae urges Gwiyoung, who remains steadfast, despite the revelation, to show his respect by kneeling to the king. As everyone, except Gwiyoung, bows to the king, a lady emerges with her baby. She attests to personally witnessing Gwiyoung the previous night when he saved her and her child. However, upon catching sight of Gwiyoung, she recoils in fear, mistaking him for a barbarian and questions why one of them is present. The guards dismiss her claims, insisting that the man they believe to be Gwiyoung is indeed him. The lady persists, asserting that she saw him among the barbarians, ruthlessly slaying people of Joseon. Tae is thrown into confusion by the revelation and demands an explanation from Gwiyoung. Without hesitation, Gwiyoung seizes Tae by the collar, his gaze intense. He remarks to the lady that she should consider herself fortunate to have encountered him, emphasizing that if her accusations are true, he is not the sole source of trouble. Gwiyoung boldly declares his intention to assassinate King Yidu and unify Jurchen. As Tae attempts to interject, Gwiyoung strikes him across the face, leaving him wounded, a stark reminder of the potential dangers of joining him. The murderous intent directed at the king incites fury among the onlookers. One individual, consumed by rage, attempts to attack Gwiyoung from behind, only to be grievously injured by a single swift strike from Gwiyoung. As Gwiyoung swiftly incapacitates the attacking individuals, more people rush towards him in an attempt to subdue him. However, even their combined efforts prove futile against his formidable strength. Sneaking up from behind, another man tries to stab Gwiyoung, but he too is effortlessly thwarted. Lying wounded on the ground, Tae reflects on his failure to realize that the vengeful spirits haunting Gwiyoung are those of the people of Joseon whom he has slain. Meanwhile, the guards frantically search for Lee Soon-mong to escort the king to safety, but he is beyond their reach, acting independently. With time running out, they contemplate how to ensure the king's escape, but before they can act, Gwiyoung charges towards his highness. Suddenly, the boy who previously pretended to be Gwiyoung grabs a rod from a nearby soldier, ready to intervene. As Gwiyoung closes in on the king, ready to strike, the little boy acts swiftly, kicking the rod towards Gwiyoung and managing to stab it into him. Enraged, Gwiyoung grabs the boy, but before he can retaliate, the boy pushes the weapon further into Gwiyoung's body, causing him to vomit blood. The king, recognizing the boy from before, questions his identity. In response, the boy reveals himself as the true Gwiyoung by uncovering his hair. Meanwhile, Tae, lying injured on the ground, witnesses the vengeful spirits of the slain barbarians surrounding the boy and realizes his true identity. Guys, I think I accidentally wrote myself into a corner where even the characters are questioning their own identity. The imposter removes the rod from his body and denounces Gwiyoung as the enemy of Jurchen, declaring his sole purpose for being there is to find and kill the real Gwiyoung. In a swift motion, Gwiyoung punches him in the face, accusing him of being all talk. Undeterred, the fake Gwiyoung brandishes his deadly weapon and makes a dash towards the king. However, he is intercepted and stabbed by Lee Sun-mong. The king's guards demand an explanation from Lee for his tardiness. Lee, who had previously been spreading the news of the king's order to the illiterate public, explains that he was acting on the king's command. Lee is instructed not to kill the fake Gwiyoung, as there are numerous questions they need answers to. Complying with the order, Lee withdraws his sword from the imposter's chest, but before he can react, the barbarian is attacked by Gwiyoung. Gwiyoung shows no mercy, relentlessly pummeling the barbarian. Lee admonishes Gwiyoung, calling him crazy, and reminding him that he should have followed the king's orders. Gwiyoung gestures towards the slain men, explaining to Lee that this is the havoc barbarians wreak, a nightmare he's endured countless times. He reveals that these barbarians were responsible for the destruction of his village 5 years ago, which resulted in the deaths of all the villagers, including both of his parents. Gwiyoung asserts that these barbarians have forfeited their right to live and declares his intent to eliminate every last one of them. However, as he voices his determination, his sister arrives and embraces him from behind, pleading with him to stop, explaining that his ferocity is frightening her. Moved by his sister's words, Gwiyoung humbles himself before the king, imploring for a position and offering himself for whatever use the king sees fit. He requests that his sister be given the opportunity to live a peaceful, normal life. The king questions whether Gwiyoung's sole motivation for seeking a position is his sister. Gwiyoung responds, expressing that in this harsh existence, his greatest wish is for his sister to experience a life of tranquility. The king's disapproval only fuels Gwiyoung's determination further. He boldly questions whether the king's disapproval stems from his disobedience or from his earlier attempt to strike him. The king responds that the reason for his disapproval is precisely the reason Gwiyoung desires to serve him. Lee, with his hand resting on his sword, urges Gwiyoung to relent and be thankful for being spared. Despite his defiance, Gwiyoung's sister implores him to simply leave, and together they depart. As they exit, Lee approaches the king, expressing his frustration at not being able to convey something he wished to say. The king dismisses it, deeming the matter too shameless to address. As they walk together, Dongyi insists to her brother that she won't allow him to sacrifice himself for her sake. Gwiyoung is taken aback by her statement, questioning why she would say such a thing, knowing their circumstances. Dongyi responds that she will only consider such luxuries if her brother is by her side. Gwiyoung confides in his sister, revealing that on the day their parents died, he made a solemn vow to his father to protect his little sister at any cost, and he reassures her not to worry about him. Dong Yi expresses her gratitude, telling her brother that she's happy to have him by her side, and that he has already protected her throughout all this time. Gwiyoung, overwhelmed with emotion, reciprocates his sister's sentiments, expressing that he feels the same way. Suddenly, Gwiyoung senses danger, and before he can react, his sister is struck by an arrow, collapsing to the ground. He cries out her name in anguish, as barbarians materialize seemingly out of nowhere. The barbarians reveal that they have tracked Gwiyoung down with the help of their ally Makan, who, despite being strong, proved to be foolish. Tears welled up in Gwiyoung's eyes at the sight of his injured sister. Dong Yi alerts her brother to an incoming attack from behind. As the barbarian moves to strike, his blow is intercepted by Li. Gwiyoung informs Li of his sister's injury, but she reassures them both that she's all right. The barbarians, underestimating Li as a mere individual, move to attack him. However, Li swiftly demonstrates his exceptional skill with the sword, slicing through the barbarian with a magnificent display of swordsmanship, reducing him to several pieces. Turning to Gwiyoung, Li questions whether he desires death. Gwiyoung, overwhelmed with fear, stammers that his sister is dead. Witnessing Li's masterful swordplay, the barbarians recognize him as none other than Li Sunmong. Realizing they are no match for Li's prowess, akin to that of Choi Yun-duk, they hastily retreat, knowing they stand no chance against him. Ignoring Li's question, Gwiyoung rises with a visage twisted with anger and hatred. He charges towards the barbarians, vowing to exterminate every last one of them. Fueled by fury, Gwiyoung leaps into the air, slashing down the arm of the barbarian chief, who had shot his sister with an arrow. With a swift and brutal motion, he impales the chief's eyes with his sword. In the midst of the chaos, the king and his bodyguards arrive on the scene. The king turns to Li, inquiring about the direction in which Gwiyoung went. Expressing concern, the king acknowledges a critical flaw within Gwiyoung, which has led him to hesitate in granting the boy the position of informer. Gwiyoung returns after dispatching the barbarians who attacked his sister, only to find her unharmed beside the king. Confused, he questions how she escaped unscathed. Dong Yi reveals that the king intervened and saved her. As Gwiyoung expresses relief at seeing his sister alive, the king suddenly draws his sword and mercilessly slashes through her. Gwiyoung is traumatized by the brutal act and demands to know why the king has killed his sister. The king coldly informs him that his sister will revive, regardless of the injuries inflicted upon her. As Gwiyoung struggles to comprehend, the king forces him to recollect the events of the invasion 5 years ago, revealing that Gwiyoung was the sole survivor on that fateful day. The king asserts that what Gwiyoung is holding on to now is nothing. Looks like Gwiyoung's got a built-in best friend forever. Too bad it's just a hallucination, but hey, at least his imaginary sister always listens. The king endeavors to convince Gwiyoung that what he's experiencing is merely a product of his imagination. He insists that there is no one in Gwiyoung's arms, emphasizing that he has deluded himself into believing his sister is there. The king reveals that he has investigated the rumors surrounding Gwiyoung and discovered that he has been unable to cope with the loss of his sister. Gwiyoung vehemently rejects the notion, labeling it as nonsense, and reminds them all that they witnessed his sister alongside him in the government office. He implores General Li to corroborate his account, but Li contradicts him, asserting that Gwiyoung has been alone the entire time. Even the barbarians viewed Gwiyoung as a fool, bewildered by his apparent madness as he converses with someone who isn't there. This revelation shatters Gwiyoung, and he struggles to accept what he's heard. The scene transitions to flashbacks from the past. Gwiyoung's father is mortally wounded by a barbarian, instructing Gwiyoung to save his sister at any cost before he passes away. Fleeing from the village, Gwiyoung encounters Grandpa Kong, who expresses relief at seeing them alive and inquires about the others. He asks Gwiyoung if they are the only survivors. Gwiyoung breaks down in tears, revealing to Grandpa Kong that both of his parents have been murdered. The old man embraces Gwiyoung, comforting him by ensuring that their survival is what matters most. As they embrace, Grandpa Kong notices that Gwiyoung's sister has been struck by an arrow, though she still shows signs of life. Urging Gwiyoung not to remove the arrow, Grandpa Kong advises him to find a boat. He suggests that escaping by boat may offer them a chance to flee the barbarians and reach the next village where they can seek immediate medical attention for his sister. Suddenly, they come under attack by a barrage of arrows. From an approaching group of barbarians, Gwiyoung grabs his sister and rushes towards the boat, desperate to escape to safety. As the barbarians draw near, Gwiyoung manages to escape, urging his sister to hold on a little longer. Despite the barbarians considering him just a child and debating whether to pursue him, their leader commands them to launch a fire arrow at his boat. As Gwiyoung rows desperately, the boat is bombarded by multiple fire arrows. Without hesitation, he throws himself over his sister, shielding her from the deadly projectiles. Tragically, the boat ignites and capsizes, plunging them into the water. Gwiyoung struggles to keep his sister afloat, but the harsh circumstances overwhelm him. The scene shifts back to the present, and Gwiyoung appears to have recalled the traumatic events. Panic sets in, and the king offers a heartfelt apology, admitting his failure to protect Gwiyoung's village and family. He implores Gwiyoung to direct his blame towards him and the nation, rather than internalizing it. The king urges Gwiyoung to let go of his resentment and hatred, promising him a chance at an ordinary life if he can find it in himself to forgive and forget his sister. As Gwiyoung realizes that his sister hasn't aged a day, her image fades before his eyes, and he collapses to the ground, overcome with sorrow, his hands trembling as tears stream down his face. Sensing his distress, the king presents Gwiyoung with a second option. He acknowledges that if Gwiyoung wishes to spend the rest of his days consumed by anger, he can show him another path. The king proposes that Gwiyoung join the Informer, an elite organization established to combat the Jurchens. He implores Gwiyoung to become a savior of the nation and its people, describing it as a humble request from a king. Upon the king's inquiry about whom he seeks, Gwiyoung reveals his newfound clarity and determination. He expresses his desire to locate the individual responsible for the destruction of his village, the murder of his parents, and the apparent demise of his sister. Driven by the need for vengeance, Gwiyoung requests the king's assistance in his quest. In response, the king presents him with a green-colored Jade Plaque, instructing him to keep it safe until the winter's end. This signifies Gwiyoung's invitation to join the ranks of the Informer. With a solemn nod, Gwiyoung accepts the Jade Plaque, understanding that his journey toward justice and retribution has only just begun. As days pass, Gwiyoung strives to overcome his hallucinations. Enjoying a sumptuous meal, Gwiyoung is joined by General Lee, who orders some alcohol, deeming it his life's pleasure. Lee casually asks Gwiyoung if he still sees his sister, to which Gwiyoung shakes his head, indicating that the hallucinations have ceased. Lee offers Gwiyoung some alcohol as a gesture of camaraderie, and commends him for taking steps toward maturity by letting go of his deceased sister. However, Gwiyoung declines the offer, prompting Lee to question why he bothers to engage with someone like Gwiyoung, despite being one of Joseon's finest swordsmen. Lee candidly admits that he finds Gwiyoung intriguing, particularly impressed by his ability to take a life at such a young age. Lee remarks on the interesting meaning of Gwiyoung's name, likening it to a ghost's shadow. However, Gwiyoung corrects him, explaining that Gwi in his name means precious and Young means welcome. Lee offers his apologies, admitting to his tendency not to delve deeply into meanings. He advises Gwiyoung to confront his past, reconcile with it, and forge a new path forward. Encouraging Gwiyoung to relax, Lee offers him a drink, which turns out to be potent enough to render Gwiyoung unconscious with just a single bowl. Lee's true intention behind this gesture becomes clear as he swiftly retrieves the Jade Plaque from Gwiyoung, a task accomplished effortlessly. As night descends, Gwiyoung awakens, struggling to recall what transpired. Slowly, the events of the evening come back to him, and he realizes that General Lee has departed, leaving him to ponder the implications of their encounter. As the day of royal recruitment dawns, Gwiyoung is determined to seek vengeance for his sister's death. However, when he reaches for his pocket to retrieve the Jade Plaque, he discovers it's missing. Frantically, he removes all of his upper garments in a desperate search, but the item is nowhere to be found. High up in the mountains, a multitude of people begins to gather for the recruitment event. Among them, two men spot Gwiyoung and presume he will rank below them. They question why a mere child like him would dare to apply for the royal recruitment. As Gwiyoung steps forward to register, he approaches the counter and identifies himself as Gwiyoung from Muchang. He explains that he received a Jade Plaque directly from the king, but unfortunately lost it on his journey. However, the attendant dismisses his claim as a joke and instructs the soldiers to remove the boy from the area. Once the registration process begins, Kim Jong steps forward and declares that he has been tasked with overseeing the royal recruitment. He outlines the stringent selection criteria to the gathered crowd, emphasizing the high standards required. Kim Jong also highlights the exceptional benefits and wages offered to those who are selected, while cautioning them about the dangers that lie ahead. As the first test commences, Gwiyoung becomes the subject of ridicule, for supposedly lying about possessing the Jade Plaque and then losing it. Mocking whispers spread among the participants, suggesting he should simply give up, as he won't withstand the challenges ahead. Kim Jong initiates the test, explaining that the objective is straightforward: retrieve a red feathered arrow from the mountain top. However, with only 10 arrows available, the task becomes more challenging. As the other 30 men dash off, Gwiyoung remains stationary. Kim Jong urges him to move swiftly, emphasizing the urgency of the task. Despite the urgency, Gwiyoung finds himself preoccupied with thoughts of how he lost the Jade Plaque given to him by the king. It's only when he realizes he's lagging far behind that he snaps out of his reverie, understanding that even securing the 10th position might prove difficult. As Gwiyoung ventures farther, he encounters a disturbing sight: numerous men lying unconscious on the ground. Suddenly, he senses a presence behind him and narrowly avoids being struck by a branch wielded by an assailant. Turning to face his attackers, Gwiyoung finds himself confronted by a group of 4 men, brandishing similar makeshift weapons. The men reveal their nefarious scheme. While there may only be 10 arrows available, Kim Jong never specified that only 10 individuals would pass the first round. Their plan is to incapacitate as many competitors as possible and pilfer the arrows from those descending the mountainside. In a swift and decisive move, Gwiyoung disarms one of the assailants and strikes him down. He expresses admiration for their cunning plan, albeit tinged with a hint of sarcasm. Despite the odds stacked against him, Gwiyoung remains undaunted, ready to face whatever challenges lie ahead. Gwiyoung derides their choice of crude weapons for what they consider a brilliant strategy. Enraged by his mockery, the man whose weapon was taken orders his companions to attack Gwiyoung. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to General Choi and General Lee, who have arrived to observe the recruitment test. General Choi explains to Lee that those selected will be offered an opportunity for Mi-on Cheon, a system granting low-class citizens the chance to elevate their social status and shed their previous identities, integrating into the upper class. As they stand on the towering mountain cliff, both generals discuss the privileges and seriousness associated with being an informer. Lee scans the area, searching for Gwiyoung. Choi inquires if Lee is looking for the boy who claimed to possess the Jade Plaque directly from the king. Lee confirms the validity of the claim, explaining that due to certain circumstances, the king himself had to intervene in the test. Choi expresses incredulity at the notion of a mere child being entrusted with a Jade Plaque, considering that the informers are intended to be a most elite and intelligent group operating in the northern region. While acknowledging the unfortunate circumstances surrounding the boy, Choi questions the justification for granting him such a prestigious item. Lee acknowledges Gwiyoung's exceptional strength and talent, regardless of his age. He explains to Choi that Gwiyoung has not only defeated the barbarians, but has also survived numerous battles, indicating both his skill and experience. Lee emphasizes that beyond mere swordsmanship, actual combat experience is paramount, and Gwiyoung possesses both experience and a natural aptitude for the position. Meanwhile, the scene returns to Gwiyoung, who appears to be handling the situation with relative ease. Despite one of the assailants managing to strike him in the face with a stick, Gwiyoung dismisses the effectiveness of such crude weapons, as he had earlier predicted. As Gwiyoung swiftly neutralizes the other assailants, the group leader realizes he's outmatched. Desperate to salvage the situation, he proposes an alliance, suggesting that together they could be the sole survivors of this round. However, Gwiyoung counters that if he were the only one to succeed, the test would be concluded, dismissing Gwiyoung's stance as foolishness. The group leader argues that Gwiyoung lacks the capacity to handle the remaining competitors alone. He emphasizes the need for collaboration, highlighting his own physical prowess as a reliable asset. The leader asserts that Gwiyoung requires a strategist, implying that his youth renders him deficient in resourcefulness. The group leader, Dumak, finds Gwiyoung's name familiar, suggesting he might have heard it somewhere before. After introducing himself, Dumak proposes an alliance which Gwiyoung accepts. While Dumak showcases his agility by climbing a tree to scout, Gwiyoung remains on the ground, ready for action. As time passes without any returnees, both wonder why others haven't returned yet and decide to investigate. Dumak suggests reaching the mountain top before dusk, initially planning to stay behind equals while Gwiyoung checks. Dumak is surprised by Gwiyoung's insistence on accompanying him. He marvels at Gwiyoung's strength for his age and feels relieved by his apparent lack of sharpness. Dumak sees an opportunity to leverage Gwiyoung's abilities to his advantage throughout the test. Upon reaching the mountain peak, they encounter someone who appears to be a proctor. Gwiyoung is puzzled by the presence of a proctor. At such a remote location, But his attention is drawn to the proctor's Jade Plaque. Reflecting on his lost Jade Plaque, Gwiyoung muses that if he still had it, he might have avoided the hardships he's facing now, similar to the person in front of him. The person with the Jade Plaque questions if they are the last two remaining and probes into the reasons for their tardiness. He suspects that Gwiyoung might have been the one, boasting about possessing a Jade Plaque. The person questions Gwiyoung about his understanding of the significance and responsibility associated with the Jade Plaque. He explains that it's a symbol granted by the king to those acknowledged as his sword. Mocking Gwiyoung's perceived incompetence, he suggests that someone as crude and ignorant as him has no right to possess such an item. Dumok is taken aback by the person's harsh words and begins to lecture him. Ignoring Dumok's comments, the person acting as the proctor hands Gwiyoung and Dumok two wooden rods and challenges them to attack him simultaneously. He promises to give them the arrow if they manage to impress him. Dumok insists that Gwiyoung step aside, seeing this as a rare opportunity to teach the proctor a lesson. He charges at the proctor, taunting him for his lack of muscles, despite his noble background. However, the proctor swiftly evades Dumok's attack and delivers a powerful blow to his legs. He admonishes Dumok, stating that even someone of humble origins should possess decent character and humility. Gwiyoung intervenes, pulling Dumok back and urging the proctor to cease his aggression. He questions whether the proctor intends to kill someone during a selection test. Ignoring Gwiyoung's plea, the proctor grabs him by the collar and forcefully slams him to the ground, emphasizing the importance of caution when one's skills are lacking. With quick reflexes, Gwiyoung disarms the proctor, leaving him momentarily stunned. Meanwhile, Dumok, despite being down, defends Gwiyoung's skills, stating that although he may seem inexperienced, his abilities are far from lacking. Capitalizing on the proctor's momentary distraction, Gwiyoung seizes the opportunity and strikes at his leg with precision. As the fight continues, the proctor recognizes Gwiyoung's talent and physical abilities, praising his precise movements and unconventional kicks. However, he points out that Gwiyoung's fighting style lacks refinement, comparing it to that of a wild beast. Despite acknowledging Gwiyoung's skills, the proctor emphasizes that there is still room for improvement. Gwiyoung remains focused and determined, dodging the proctor's attacks with ease and showcasing his agility. Although the proctor acknowledges Gwiyoung's abilities, he continues to challenge him, pushing him to refine his fighting style further. As the intense battle rages on, both Gwiyoung and the proctor are fully engaged, each striving to outmaneuver the other. As the battle intensifies, Gwiyoung resorts to using sand to temporarily blind the proctor, demonstrating his resourcefulness in combat. However, the proctor becomes furious and draws his sword, accusing Gwiyoung of dishonoring the Jade Plaque and employing cheap tactics to gain an advantage. Dumok tries to intervene, urging Gwiyoung to retreat, but Gwiyoung seems to relish the challenge. Undeterred by the proctor's threats, he prepares to face him. Armed only with a wooden sword, Gwiyoung confidently declares that he would be willing to risk losing an arm if the proctor were to wield a real sword. Before their battle can escalate further, Kim Jong intervenes and disarms them both, putting an end to the confrontation. Gwiyoung and the proctor are left without their weapons, their clash unresolved for the time being. Kim Jong reprimands Yu Ji-young for his actions, expressing disappointment that Yu Ji-young resorted to drawing a real sword instead of simply assessing the candidate's abilities. He reminds Yu Ji-young of his role as a proctor and instructs him to bring Gwiyoung an arrow, declaring him the only successful candidate from the group. Yu Ji-young reluctantly complies with Kim Jong's orders, but then proceeds to cut off all the arrows from the tree. He asserts his authority as the proctor and decides that none of the candidates will pass under his watch. Despite Kim Jong's directive, Yu Ji-young seems determined to uphold his own standards for the test. Dumok surprises Gwiyoung by revealing that he secretly grabbed a red-feathered arrow during their altercation with the proctor. Gwiyoung acknowledges Dumok's cunningness and then expresses gratitude as Dumok hands him the arrow, fulfilling their agreement to support each other. Overwhelmed with emotion, Gwiyoung embraces Dumok tightly. With both Dumok and Gwiyoung having passed the test, they move forward as successful candidates from Group 3. Kim Jong advises Yu Ji-young to exercise moderation in his duties, reminding him that his harsh approach could prevent anyone from passing the test. However, Yu Ji-young remains steadfast in his belief that only exceptional soldiers should advance to the final selection, dismissing the other candidates as unworthy. Kim Jong confronts Yu Ji-young about his behavior, revealing that he nearly lost his arm while trying to intervene in the fight that Yu Ji-young escalated. Kim emphasizes that he protected Gwiyoung during the altercation, not Gwiyoung as Joseon had assumed. As the second round approaches, Gwiyoung expresses reluctance to participate, feeling satisfied with his success in the first round. Dumak observes the successful candidates from each group and attributes their advancement to having faced unfavorable conditions due to a flawed proctor. General Lee's entrance commands silence among the gathered men, and as he introduces himself, they recognize him as Lee Soon-mong, the renowned archer. His demonstration of skill, shooting down a small plum from a distance, earns him admiration and confirms his reputation as the divine archer. Following his impressive display, General Lee outlines the second round of the recruitment test. He assures the men that this round is simpler than the first, explaining that they need only hold a large melon and remain stationary, while he strikes it down with a red feather arrow. As the chubby man bravely steps forward, General Lee acknowledges his courage with a nod of approval. While the man holds the melon aloft, General Lee takes a moment to enjoy a sip of alcohol, seemingly unfazed by the impending task. With a hint of jest in his voice, General Lee remarks on the slim odds of success, suggesting that even if the arrow were to strike the man's body, he would still pass the test if he remained steadfast and unmoving. As Lee releases the arrow, the chubby candidate Mandyuk stumbles in fear. Despite pleading for another chance, the guard shatters his arrow, marking him as the first failure of the second round. This pattern repeats with subsequent candidates, some succumbing to fear, while others resign themselves to defeat. Amidst the mounting tension, the 17th candidate, Dumak, steps forward. Observing the previous failures, Dumak devises a calculated strategy. Recognizing that fear often stems from visual cues, he deliberately averts his gaze. Gwiyoung praises Dumak's ingenuity, noting his astute analysis and quick thinking. Additionally, he admires Dumak's physical strength, a testament to his confidence in facing the challenge ahead. General Lee scolds Dumak for his foolishness, just as he releases the arrow. In a moment of panic, Dumak realizes his mistake. By turning away, he has only heightened his fear of the unknown. However, luck favors him as he narrowly avoids disaster by shifting his position at the last moment, causing the melon to burst and securing his passage to the next round. Despite his success, Dumak's triumph is marred by embarrassment as he realizes he has wet his pants in fear. Turning his attention to the next candidate, General Lee calls upon Gwiyoung. As whispers spread about the rumored ghost's shadow, all eyes are fixed on the seemingly young contestant. Undeterred, Gwiyoung approaches General Lee, who feigns ignorance and questions his presence. Gwiyoung explains that he lost his Jade Plaque and, lacking credibility, he is compelled to participate in the selection test. As the murmurs about Gwiyoung being the ghost's shadow circulate among the candidates, Dumak suddenly realizes why the name sounded familiar. Standing beside General Lee, Kim suggests that Gwiyoung, having been awarded the Jade Plaque, should be exempt from the test. However, General Lee responds with a stern glare, stating that since Gwiyoung does not currently possess the Jade Plaque, he must participate in the examination. Lee emphasizes the inherent value of such tests. With determination, Lee positions Gwiyoung for the challenge. Dumak sees the wisdom in General Lee's decision, understanding that recruiting Gwiyoung without the test could have sparked controversy. Lee relaxes, feeling confident that he has acted in Gwiyoung's best interests. As General Lee pulls the trigger, everyone watches in awe, as the arrow seems to be aimed directly at Gwiyoung's head. Sensing the danger, Gwiyoung knows he must dodge the arrow to avoid failing the exam. However, Dumak shouts at him to endure it, warning him of the consequences of dodging. With no other choice, Gwiyoung swiftly dodges the arrow. The spectators gasp in disbelief, believing that Gwiyoung has failed the test. But to their astonishment, Gwiyoung catches the arrow with his bare hands. Holding the arrow triumphantly, he swiftly pierces it through the melon, asking if he has passed. General Lee, impressed by Gwiyoung's quick thinking and skill, declares him brilliant and announces his success in the exam. As General Lee calls for the next candidate, a visibly intoxicated participant staggers forward. Kim suggests continuing the exam the next day due to the man's state, but General Lee insists on concluding it promptly. With a determined look, he fires the arrow, prompting Kim to urge the participant to dodge. However, the candidate remains resolute and endures the arrow striking his abdomen. Lee and Kim rush towards him to check if he is fine. Fortunately, the arrow has avoided any critical areas, but the 18th participant is clearly upset. As he endures an immense pain, he criticizes Kim and the king for their disregard for people's lives. To be honest, the guy is right. Anybody would have said the same if he or she was in his place. Won't you agree? As the participant speaks ill of the king, Lee becomes furious. He brandishes Kim's sword and threatens to cut 3 inches off the boy's tongue. However, before he can act, General Choi, the Joseon's best sword, intervenes and sends Lee flying. He vows to confront General Lee Soon-mong, the Joseon's best archer, tomorrow, seeking forgiveness from the king. It seems like tensions are running high, with emotions clouding judgment. The scene transitions, revealing Lee Soon-mong's backstory. Born as the eldest son of a respected servant to the king, Lee had the advantage of starting his career in the Joseon military earlier than most. His exceptional talents, alongside Choi, earned him renown. However, despite his prowess and contributions to the nation, Lee struggled with a unique problem: his unconventional personality. Contrary to his esteemed position, Lee had a penchant for indulging in vices like trash talk, women, and alcohol. As he climbed the ranks, his unorthodox behavior led to a string of problems and incidents, causing headaches for those around him. One day, in his usual intoxicated state, Lee insulted Gwiyoung, and then challenged him to determine who was the best sword of Joseon. This angered Choi, who refused, citing a direct prohibition from the king. Lee persisted, mocking Choi and provoking him further, leading to a public altercation. This was just one among countless other incidents caused by Lee, and it seemed there was no end in sight. During a royal meeting, many generals urged the king to dismiss Lee and punish him severely for his inappropriate behavior and numerous incidents. However, the king silenced them all, ordering them never to bring it up again. Despite the pleas, the king remained resolute, refusing to punish Lee regardless of the circumstances. The scene shifts back to the present time, and Dumak fills Gwiyoung in on all the incidents involving General Lee, emphasizing that Lee has never faced any consequences for his actions. One reason might be his status as the son of a meritorious retainer, but the more obvious one is his indispensable competence as an officer, making him difficult to replace. As Choi berates Lee for his behavior, he swiftly orders the guards to escort the injured participant to a physician for treatment, ensuring it's free of charge. Ignoring Choi's reprimand, Lee draws his sword and challenges him to a duel, declaring that there can be only one best sword, and insinuating that the present moment seems opportune. As the guards and Kim attempt to restrain Lee, citing his drunken state, Lee pays no heed and initiates the first strike. In response, Choi draws his sword and issues a threat, expressing his intent to kill Lee, as he had wished. The two engage in a fierce combat, during which Lee manages to land a stab of his sword on Choi's arm, taunting him about his age. Lee then draws his sword and delivers slashing blows to General Choi's neck and chest, proclaiming himself as the best sword. However, it becomes evident that it was all a product of General Lee's drunken hallucinations. Kim consults General Choi for his directives. Choi struggles to comprehend how such an immense responsibility for selection could be entrusted to someone like Lee. In response, Choi delivers a decisive kick to Lee, rendering him unconscious, recognizing that even the act of killing Lee would hold little value. Choi orders his immediate confinement to jail. Despite Lee's unconscious state, he continues to harbor grandiose dreams of being acclaimed as the best in all of Joseon. Turning to General Choi for guidance, Kim seeks instructions on how to proceed with the remaining candidates. General Choi advises him to adhere to the original test, which focused on assessing the fundamental skill of using a bow and arrow. It becomes apparent that General Lee's actions of striking melons were driven solely by his personal gratification. Approached by one of the guards, General Choi receives news of Gwiyoung's remarkable feat, catching General Lee's arrow bare-handed. With confirmation that Gwiyoung received the Jade Plaque directly from the king, the guard expresses his intent to transfer him. Seeing this as a chance to witness the boy's true capabilities firsthand, Choi decides to allow Gwiyoung to complete the entire test. Stepping forward before the participants, General Choi announces that he will personally oversee and manage the remainder of the examination. Choi sets the stage for the third test, emphasizing its focus on evaluating the participants' combat skills. Each individual is granted the freedom to select their adversary. For a one-on-one duel, he clarifies that the outcome of these skirmishes holds no significance, rather he will assess the participants based on the substance of their engagements. Turning to Dumak, Gwiyoung proposes a match, but Dumak, played by inner trepidation, offers excuses, citing the camaraderie between them. Finding an opponent proves effortless for Dumak, yet the public's awareness of Gwiyoung's reputation as the ghost's shadow leaves them hesitant to engage him in combat. As Gwiyoung remains the sole contender, Choi contemplates promoting him to the next stage. However, before he can make a decision, The individual wounded by General Lee's arrow steps forward, expressing his readiness to confront Gwiyoung. Despite Choi's offer of automatic advancement, due to his injuries, the man adamantly insists on engaging Gwiyoung in combat. In a whispered exchange, Gwiyoung attempts to dissuade him, suggesting they both abstain from fighting to secure a default victory. However, the wounded man strikes a nerve by alluding to rumors about Gwiyoung's visions of his deceased sister, taunting him with the notion of her potential disapproval. Despite Choi's impending intervention, Gwiyoung accepts the challenge, his resolve firm. As the round commences, two skilled martial artists step forward, captivating the audience with their impressive maneuvers. However, Choi quickly grows impatient and halts their display, deriding it as nothing more than a choreographed routine. When he learns they are childhood friends, Choi coldly orders them to fight to the death, disregarding their long-standing bond. Desperate to impress and secure their selection, the friends reluctantly engage in combat, their friendship overshadowed by the stakes at hand. Despite one of them sustaining severe injuries, hesitance arises when it comes to delivering further blows. Yet, under Choi's stern command, the reluctant combatant presses on, compelled to obey regardless of his misgivings. Dumak voices his concern over Lee's erratic behavior, but finds Choi's brutality equally disturbing. As the matches progress, it's finally Gwiyoung's turn to face Dam Yi, the wounded participant. Before entering the fray, Dumak questions Gwiyoung about the morality of potentially killing a fellow contender. Gwiyoung responds with a smile, indicating his readiness for the battle. Despite Kim's attempts to dissuade Dam Yi and remind him of other opportunities, Dam Yi remains steadfast in his desire to confront the ghost's shadow, driven by the rare chance before him. The battle erupts, and Gwiyoung swiftly aims a kick at Dam Yi's neck, catching him off guard. However, Dam Yi manages to narrowly evade the attack, displaying agility. Gwiyoung questions Dam Yi if he has unknowingly provoked him, to which Dam Yi cryptically refers to Gwiyoung's sister, suggesting there's more to their past. Utilizing a hip pull technique, Dam Yi swiftly maneuvers Gwiyoung to the ground, gaining the upper hand. He follows up with a barrage of punches, but Gwiyoung, in a desperate attempt to defend himself, tightly grabs on the Don's injury, causing him to recoil in pain. Seizing the opportunity, Gwiyoung quickly regains his footing and delivers precise strikes to Dam Yi's vulnerable areas, focusing on exploiting his injuries. As Dam attempts to subdue Gwiyoung, Gwiyoung unexpectedly employs the same hip pull technique that Dam used on him earlier. Choi, intrigued by Gwiyoung's ability to replicate the move, after witnessing it just once, watches closely. Deciding to end the battle, Gwiyoung steps away, expressing his reluctance to continue. But as he turns, Dam launches a surprise attack from behind with a spear-like weapon. Choi, unfazed by the sudden turn of events, allows the battle to proceed, emphasizing that there are no restrictions on weapon use. Gwiyoung, dismayed by Choi's approval of such underhanded tactics, unsheaths his sword, ready to face Dam head-on. Dumak voices his disbelief at the actions of the generals and military leaders, accusing them of madness for forcing competitors to fight to the death. Gwiyoung, acknowledging Choi's order as tacit approval to engage his opponent, expresses his readiness to comply by taking his opponent down. However, Choi interjects, emphasizing that Gwiyoung must only subdue his opponent, not kill him. He reasons that, if an informer were to eliminate all the barbarians encountered, there would be no one left to gather information from. Respecting Choi's directive, Gwiyoung relinquishes his sword, admitting that he lacks the skill to wield it without causing harm. Moreover, as he has never taken the life of a fellow Joseon, he chooses not to resort to lethal force. Acting swiftly, Gwiyoung incapacitates his opponent and brings him to the ground without causing serious harm. The scene transitions, revealing Dam Yi's harrowing past. He is depicted desperately trying to rouse his father, pleading for him to wake up and save them. His father, resigned to their fate, expresses a desire for both of them to perish on the spot, as they have nowhere else to flee. With these words, his father passes away, leaving Dam Yi alone and bereft. Soon after, barbarians catch sight of him and capture him, along with another child. Dam Yi reflects on his predicament, attributing it to his parents' perceived cowardice, and wonders if the other enslaved child has endured similar circumstances. Suddenly, one of the barbarians stumbles, providing a momentary distraction. Seizing the opportunity, the other enslaved child swiftly dispatches the barbarian, with a dagger to the neck before he can react. The other child was Gwiyoung, and on that fateful day, he rescued Dam from the barbarians, Gwiyoung educates Dom on the barbarians' vulnerability when they're isolated, emphasizing how easily they can be dispatched when separated from their group. With a solemn expression, Gwiyoung entrusts Dom with his weapon, urging him to survive and eliminate more of their adversaries. In the midst of Gwiyoung's conversation with his absent sister, a barbarian sneaks up on him from behind, grasping his neck menacingly. Just as the barbarian threatens to strangle him, Dom summons his courage, seizing a spearhead weapon from a fallen foe, and swiftly eliminates the assailant, saving Gwiyoung from certain peril. The scene returns to Gwiyoung and Dom's intense confrontation. Dom relentlessly thrusts his spear, but Gwiyoung deftly evades each strike with precision. As Dom pleads for Gwiyoung to finish him off, Gwiyoung disarms him, swiftly trapping him with a rod around his neck. Once again, Gwiyoung implores Dom to survive and exact vengeance upon the barbarians. With this, the battle concludes and Gwiyoung emerges victorious. The next match pits Yeongnu against Dumuk, both formidable figures in their own right. Using only a feeble stick, Dumuk shatters it against Yeongnu's head. He then enlightens Yeongnu, asserting that true strength lies not solely in physical prowess, but also in intellect. As the round concludes, Choi announces the names of those who have passed the third round. Gwiyoung, Dumuk, Dam Yi, and 6 others are among the successful candidates. The remaining participants are asked to leave. Choi then assembles the 9 selected individuals and explains the details of the 4th and final round. Choi addresses the group, acknowledging that they might have guessed it, but he clarifies that this is not just an ordinary recruitment exam. It's a test to select informers. That evening, the participants gather at a restaurant where they engage in a heated discussion about the role of an informer. Some believe that informers are specialized spies, while others think their role involves reconnaissance. One participant shares that, according to his knowledge, they would need to infiltrate the Joseon tribe's territory. Despite the dangers, he points out that the compensation and salary package are quite attractive. Another adds that serving as an informer for 5 years could easily exempt them from a lifetime of military service. They debate whether becoming an informer is the right choice. General Choi has given them the option to either withdraw or face the risks. Dam Yi ends the discussion by declaring his willingness to take on the risks. Using his words, Dumuk instills some sense into the group, reminding them that they will not encounter such a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity again. Don't tell me Dumuk is going to give another lecture here. Dumuk makes his case, asserting that risking one's life to ascend to a higher status is preferable to living like a dog and dying with nothing. Both Dumuk and Gwiyoung raise their first bowls of alcohol, but it proves to be too much as they slump onto the table. Their determination inspires everyone present, and a sense of resolve settles over the group. Suddenly, barbarians burst into the establishment, wielding guns and seizing the waitress as a hostage. They command the participants to remain where they are. Amidst their argument about crossing the river and eating, they order everyone to stay silent while they indulge in their meal. The participants find it odd to see Jurchens in the tavern and worry that they might harm the locals. One suggests staying quiet and waiting for the right moment to act. Just as he says this, Dumuk snaps out of his drunken stupor and, still a bit tipsy, approaches the barbarians. When they demand to know why he defied their orders, he suddenly attacks and knocks one of them down. When the others ask why he did it, Dumuk explains that these barbarians are fake and not real Jurchens. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in a tavern. He suspects it's another test for the informers. This infuriates the barbarians, and one of them charges at Dumuk, attempting to slash him with a sword. Dumuk skillfully evades the barbarians' attack and demonstrates to his fellow participants how easy it is to outmaneuver them. He urges them all to subdue these fake Jurchens. As the participants overpower some of the barbarians, one of them moves to harm the waitress. To everyone's astonishment, Gwiyoung snaps back to his senses and swiftly stabs the barbarian in the abdomen. When the barbarian demands to know who he is, Gwiyoung introduces himself as the ghost's shadow and dispatches the assailant with a simple rod. He instructs the others to stop hesitating and eliminate the Jurchens, confirming that they are indeed the real threat. As he takes them down one by one, he recognizes one of the attackers as someone who had been with them earlier. Before he can act further, their assault is halted by the supervisor from earlier. As Dumuk contemplates that it might be part of a test, the situation takes an unexpected turn when these supposed barbarians reveal themselves to be a faction of the Joseon tribe, known for raiding villages in the surrounding area. Having eluded capture by slipping away from the main force, the government has been attempting to apprehend them for some time without success. The proctor admonishes Gwiyoung, warning him that by eliminating the scouts, he risks jeopardizing their plans. These scouts are crucial for locating the barbarians' base before launching a raid. As the proctor and Gwiyoung engage in a heated argument, Dumak notices that one of the barbarians is attempting to flee. Gwiyoung swiftly draws his sword, intercepting an arrow aimed at the proctor and saving him from harm. Despite his efforts, two of the barbarians manage to escape, prompting the proctor to angrily chastise the participants for their failure to apprehend them. General Choi arrives at the scene and accuses both the proctor and Gwiyoung of allowing the barbarians to escape. Despite feeling disheartened by the failure, Gwiyoung is unexpectedly praised by Choi. He acknowledges that while mistakes were made, Gwiyoung deserves recognition for his bravery in protecting the Joseon people. Choi attributes the fault to the incompetence of military officials who allowed the barbarians to slip away. Choi acknowledges Gwiyoung's dedication to Joseon, but questions whether it translates to suitability as an informer. He probes Gwiyoung about his ability to set aside his hatred for the Yeojin tribe if he were to assume the role. Gwiyoung, in turn, queries Choi about the efficacy of two approaches: direct confrontation versus adopting the role of an informer to create opportunities for eliminating more barbarians. Kim Jong interjects, asserting that becoming an informer would indeed enable Gwiyoung to eliminate a greater number of barbarians. Encouraged by this perspective, Gwiyoung expresses his readiness to suppress his animosity and embrace the role of an informer to maximize his impact against the barbarians. However, the proctor intervenes, grabbing Gwiyoung by the collar and reprimanding him for his decision. As the proctor prepares to admonish Gwiyoung, General Choi intervenes, announcing his decision to divide the applicants into 3 teams and assign a senior informer to each. He instructs them to split into 3 directions and capture the fleeing barbarians alive, emphasizing their importance as scouts and the sole lead to their base. With this directive, both their final test and their inaugural mission as informers commence. Dam Yi, Gwiyoung, Dumak, and the proctor find themselves grouped together in the same team. Dumak notes the awkwardness of this arrangement given the frequent clashes between the proctor and Gwiyoung whenever they cross paths. Dam Yi approaches the proctor, questioning whether he should address him by his name, Yu Jiang, or simply as supervisor. The proctor opts for leader as his title. Curious, Dam Yi then queries why the leader displays such rudeness and hostility toward Gwiyoung. He admits it might sound foolish, but expresses genuine curiosity. In response, the leader reminds Dam Yi of his own aggressive behavior towards Gwiyoung. During the 3rd round, Dam Yi clarifies that he misunderstood Gwiyoung, mistaking him for someone different from the person who once saved his life. Unsatisfied with the response, Dam Yi prepares to ask again, but Dumak intervenes, urging him to focus on the task at hand, capturing the barbarians. The leader warns Gwiyoung that if he repeats his actions from the tavern upon encountering the barbarians, he will not hesitate to kill him for real. Can someone tell me why everyone here is always in a mood to kill each other? As Dumak senses a presence, he urgently shouts at everyone to take cover. It turns out to be a group of barbarians engaged in conversation, but they don't match the description of the ones who escaped. The leader suspects they may be near the barbarians' base. Urging the group to follow quietly, he notices Gwiyoung bristling with rage at the sight of the barbarians. Gwiyoung recognizes one of the barbarians as the individual responsible for the deaths of his parents and sister, and driven by vengeance, he lunges forward to confront him. In the heat of the moment, he demands to know if the barbarian remembers him, after 5 long years of waiting for this reckoning. The scene shifts to another group, where the team leader reprimands them for their noisy footsteps, likening them to the stomping of village beggars that could easily give away their position. Sensing the presence of a barbarian, the leader swiftly orders the team to take cover behind nearby trees. To their surprise, they spot the same barbarian who had managed to escape earlier. Confusion sets in, as they wonder how this informer, who wasn't even present at the initial encounter, could identify the escapee. Despite the leader's orders to stay back, one team member seizes what he perceives as his moment to shine and rushes towards the barbarian, brandishing a rope. Is he a cowboy or something? However, their impulsive action proves disastrous, as the team member is struck by an arrow, revealing that they have walked right into an ambush. The scene returns to Gwiyoung, consumed by rage after waiting 5 long years for this moment of reckoning. Despite his furious onslaught, the barbarian adeptly dodges Gwiyoung's attacks, revealing that they too have stumbled into an ambush. As their comrades rush to join the fray, a barrage of arrows rains down upon them, swiftly neutralized by their leader's quick reflexes. Gwiyoung, seething with fury, persists in demanding if the barbarian recognizes him. In response, the barbarian scoffs, questioning why he should know. Gwiyoung's anger only intensifies as he accuses the barbarian of being the one who raised his village and shattered his life 5 years ago. The leader implores Gwiyoung to regain his composure, warning that if he doesn't want his comrades to perish, he must leave immediately. Just as they're about to make their escape, they encounter even more barbarians blocking their path. Surrounded and seemingly trapped, the barbarians are unexpectedly felled by a barrage of stones. It's the arrival of the second team, led by Kim, that saves them. Kim gestures to Joseon, the leader of the third team, indicating an escape route. Following Joseon's lead, they dash away. Though Gwiyoung hesitates, Dumok swiftly lifts him and carries him along with the rest of the group to safety. The barbarian leader commands his warriors to pursue the teams of informers and ensure none escape. Joseon questions Kim about how he foresaw the danger. Kim reveals that they had been trailing Joseon's team from the beginning, having received intelligence about the barbarians' coordinated descent. Concerned, Joseon asks if they should rush to support the leader of the first team, Gwiyoung, known as Yacha. Kim reassures Joseon that Yacha is renowned for his prowess and doesn't need their assistance. As they put distance between themselves and the barbarians, Kim delivers a harsh punch to Gwiyoung's face, demanding to know if he's satisfied after confronting his enemy and venting his emotions. He questions Gwiyoung's recklessness, asking if he's aware of the danger he put his comrades in. Kim proceeds to reveal that the barbarian, known as Lee Hakshu, has only emerged within the past year and wasn't active in Joseon when Gwiyoung's village was destroyed 5 years ago. Despite Kim's assertions, Gwiyoung refuses to believe him, insisting that Lee Hakshu is indeed the same person he has been seeking vengeance against. Kim argues that Gwiyoung likely mistook the barbarian for his cousin Lee Man-ju, who happens to be the leader of the Yeojin tribe. He explains that the two bear a striking resemblance, leading many to confuse them at first glance. However, Joseon expresses concern about leader Gwiyoung's safety, considering the scale of the attack. He suggests they check on him. Kim dismisses the idea, describing Gwiyoung as a formidable force, likely to have escaped already. He emphasizes Gwiyoung's exceptional combat skills and extensive experience, noting that even General Choi has acknowledged his unparalleled strength. Kim urges Joseon to trust him, asserting that someone like leader Gwiyoung would never meet his end in such a place. However, the scene shifts back to the first team, revealing that Kim's confidence was misplaced. It appears that leader Gwiyoung and his entire team have been brutally slain.